So, Neil Fox, you say no more lockdowns. You've had enough.
Well, I think we've all, Dan, had enough of lockdowns, but I think also, you're pitting us as black and white. Me and Esther are going to be polar opposites. I'm sure, like all these things, we're probably quite grey, and there's a lot more commonality because I am smart too. I've got a wife and 3 kids. I've got elderly in-laws. I don't want anyone to be hurt. We don't want anyone to be unnecessarily ill. But the thing that slightly scares me at the moment is, although there's no doubt that the Omicron variant is very contagious. I mean, one of my neighbours has got COVID at the moment. 26 of them went to her Christmas party. 24 of them have got it at the moment. It's ridiculously catchy, but none of them feel ill. Okay, she had a slight headache for a day. And I think what we have to try and work out is a year ago, things were completely different to where they are now. A year ago, there was no vaccine. A year ago, we hadn't been triple jabbed. And I have to say that where we are now, Christmas 2021, we just need some common sense and we need to put everything into context. We're hearing it's very, very contagious. I agree. But what we aren't seeing yet is a massive upturn in the numbers of people going to hospital. And thank goodness we're not seeing a massive upturn in the number of people that are dying, because those are surely the figures that really matter. As your panelist said earlier, and your guest earlier said, we have to learn to live with this thing now. Is what we've got now any worse than a bad flu or really bad colds? I guess we don't quite know. I can understand the government being a little bit cautious right now because last year, let's be honest, they got caught out and our Christmases got put on hold and cancelled. I didn't see my mum last year for Christmas. I won't see her this year because she's died in between. Right? There are hundreds of thousands of people around the country that are going to be in that same situation. So we want a bit of caution, but we don't want to go insane. And I think what was interesting last night, 100 of the Prime Minister's own MPs didn't vote. Whether that's because they don't necessarily agree with it or they don't just agree in general with their leader at the moment is probably a different ballgame. I want a bit of common sense, but I don't want a knee-jerk. Put it in context. When the media every day go through the numbers of people that have been found to be new cases, can we also please put up there the number of people that are dying? And against that, put the number of people that are dying of Alzheimer's, of Parkinson's, of lung, of cancer, of heart disease, and all the other things that are really pushing COVID way down that list. That's my position.
Really good point. And so sorry to hear about your mum, Neil. Esther, my issue here is that we're in such a different position to where we were last year. Last year, I completely understand that someone like you that's in a high-risk category because of your age was not able to be protected by a vaccination. Within those 12 months, Esther, you can be triple jabbed now. And actually, the vast majority of the over 70s in this country, I think it's well over 80%, have decided to take up the option of a government booster to protect themselves. Over 96% of elderly people in this country have COVID antibodies. So why on earth are we talking about locking down again, given that completely different situation?
Because at the moment, we're fighting a war against an enemy we don't understand. That is the problem. Unfortunately, when you make comparisons with South Africa, it's not denigrating South Africa to say they have a totally different population. As Professor Whitty, known as Professor Doom to you, but Professor Expert to me, did say this evening, South Africa has a much younger population and it's also got a lot more immunity in that population. So we're
30%
an aging population. Mea culpa, I'm one of the aged. And also we have less natural immunity. So what they're saying to us, we haven't got the data. The difficulty is, Dr. Fox, what we actually, not as we know a medical doctor, but a very eminent doctor nonetheless, the difficulty is at the moment that we really have to wait for a moment to see what the lag is. You see, there is a 2-week lag, as you know, between infection and case and death. So at the moment, the statistics are not showing a rise in serious illness and death, but it's too early to tell. because this horrible thing has only been with us a couple of weeks. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm talking to my family about Christmas very seriously. We have some vulnerable members of the family who wouldn't be very well protected if they came across the virus. We have a member of the family who's a consultant who works with older people in hospital and says what she's seeing is tragic. So let's hold on to our horses. I know it's not for the Clash to say this, but let's stay calm and let's look at expert advice, because actually Professor Whitty has no particular desire to frighten you out of your wits. He doesn't particularly want to paint a dismal picture.
The past 20 months.
What he's trying to do is make sure that the service that he's responsible for will be able to provide the treatment for all the patients, not just COVID patients, but all the other patients too. And he needs us to stay healthy.
I mean, the problem is, Dr. Fox, I would say this year we have to allow kids, we have to allow young folk to be able to celebrate Christmas normally. And I think we've really got to think about vulnerable relatives. Absolutely. Take the lateral flow test before you go and visit them. Maybe do social distancing. I was in a care home the other day. And of course, I was incredibly careful in that sort of scenario. But I think, Dr. Fox, to deny young people a normal Christmas for a second year in a row is just morally unconscionable.
Well, I think it's going to be really hard all round, and it must be a very tricky set of decisions that have to be made at the top level in Downing Street, because you're balancing health, you're balancing the NHS, you're balancing beds, nurses, and availability of resources. But you've also, against that, you have to balance society, hospitality industry, shops, events, an industry out there that's just getting back on its feet. And this time around, we know
poverty causes death.
Well, it does. And also, I think people talk a lot about the mental health issues here, but I do think that we got so close last year and then it didn't happen. I think we almost accepted it sort of quite happily, as us Brits tend to do last year, because we went...
We were on that warlike footing. I mean, I didn't think it was the right decision, but I think we accepted it, whereas I think, Dame Esther, a lot of people won't accept it this year. I'm getting lots of text messages, Esther, from friends of mine who are relatively young, who say to me, Dan, mentally, psychologically, I cannot take another lockdown. My mental health cannot cope with that. What do you say to them?
I say it's very tough. It's very tough for isolated older people. It's very tough, as we've seen, for vulnerable children. This is not an easy scenario, but let me just point out to you that one of the great pharmaceutical companies who've done so much to develop the vaccines, and thank heavens for those experts, you might call them doom mongers, but they saw the danger before anyone else and they started working on those vaccines. Thank the Lord they did, not because of a feeling in their gut, but because of feeling in their intelligence and in their scientific experience that it was necessary. Now those same people are developing drugs. And if we can find a way to treat this illness so that the people who come into ICU, whether it's because they can't have the vaccine or whether it's because they've chosen not to have the vaccine, which is tragic, isn't it? But if they can take a drug which actually hits those serious symptoms and means that they can be let out in full health and the economy can flourish and, we can all live normal lives, that's what we hope. But we need those experts. Let's not decry them. Let's listen to them.
So, Esther, if you were at number 10 Downing Street right now, if you were Boris Johnson, would you put us in a form of lockdown?
I would say, let's wait until we've got the data. At the moment, I think the medical experts are going along with Plan B. I hope they are. I hope they're not being silenced or bullied or overridden. And don't ask me about those 100 MPs. My own MP here was one of them. And if I could meet him in the open air wearing
freedom
masks,
fighters, I say, Esther, they are great freedom fighters, because there is no proof, there is zero proof that vaccine passports do anything to the transmission of COVID. I actually applaud them all. Why do you not agree that they did the right thing? They're looking at the evidence and trying to protect Brits' freedoms and civil liberties.
No, they're not. No, they're not. One thing they're not doing is looking at the evidence. We're not talking about medical experts. We're talking about people who have voted with their gut.
There's no evidence for vaccine passports. There's not. Even Sturgeon admitted they were hopeless. There was a 70-page dossier produced in Scotland, and she had to concede that there's no point rolling them out any further, unless, Esther, you just want to blackmail people into getting the vaccine, and then I guess that's a slightly different question, but that didn't work in Scotland either.
Blackmail, I call it nudge, but whether it has that impact or not, I don't mind. I mean, I produce a credit card, it's got a very unflattering picture of me, and sometimes it spells my name right.
I believe.
I don't worry about that. What I say is there is a tightrope we're walking here between lives and livelihood. I believe that the British public, given the right information in the right way, will do what the experts advise, because it's not in anyone's interest.
I think they did, but maybe not now. But Neil Fox, final word to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I think we just also have to temper all of that, Esther, with we need our freedoms too. And we need to learn as human beings now to live with a little bit of risk, because we lived with a lot of risk for the last.
Because you get in a car, Esther, you get in a car.
The scientists have done a brilliant job, and they put us in a position now where I think
driving license, and I take a test, and I drive on the left, because the experts tell me that is the safest way to drive.
Well, look, it was a fascinating debate.
We will find a way to drive our way to safety and health through this COVID. I hope so, anyway.